YouTube? This is Tabletop Magic, and today we're going to talk about Living End. Living End is a very fun deck for Modern. It's actually very affordable outside of just a few cards. Are a little pricey, but other than that, it is a very affordable deck for playing Modern. It does put up some pretty good results. You can find a lot of top 8 postings for Living End within the last few months. But we'll go ahead and get into the deck. First up, we have the card that the deck is named after, Living End. And Living End doesn't sound as amazing as it actually is because of the suspend, and you'd have to wait and whatnot. But the next 7 cards are what really make the deck work. And I'm only running 3 Living Ends because you really only need 1 to go off, and 4 is okay, but you really only need 1 to go off, and you never really want to have any in your hand. They're pretty much a dead card except for in very late game grindy. But anyways, let's go ahead and we'll look at Violent Outburst. And Violent Outburst is how the deck actually works. Off of Violent Outburst has Cascade, and Cascade gives you the ability to play Living End without having to suspend it, which is very nice because Living End's mana cost is 0, so you can actually cascade into it, and Living End is the only card in the deck that costs less than 3. You have abilities that are activated for less than that, but you don't have any cards that actually cost less than 3. But you have a Violent Outburst with Cascade, and the creatures get +1, +0. Not as important as the actual Cascade effect. The creatures get +1, +0 is really almost irrelevant, aside from maybe when it comes into play with Avalanche Riders. Other than that, it is not very very important. Up next is Demonic Dread. Demonic Dread is in here only as a 3 of, because you really only need 1 Cascade spell to win the game. You don't even have to resolve the Cascade spell, just the Living End, because Cascade will go on the stack before the ability will go on the stack before the card resolves. So, but the downside of Demonic Dread, other than it being a sorcery, is that it does have to target a creature. And if there isn't a creature in play, it's kind of a dead card until you can get a creature into play, or your opponent puts one in play and you can target it. So that's pretty much the key cards in the deck. Those 10 cards are pretty much a must to have a Living End deck. Up next, I have 12 cards total that are normal cycling creatures. We'll start with Monstrous Carabid, and he is a pretty hefty 4/4. He does cost 5 if you want to do hard cast him, but you generally will never hard cast him except for in certain situations. But the cycling is very relevant. It's in the colors. He is a pretty good sized creature when he is put into play from Living End, which is he's pretty good. Up next is Deadshot Minotaur. Deadshot Minotaur, the 3 damage to target creature with flying is somewhat relevant. Sometimes, they do get something that's brought back and you do just target it with your Minotaur, which is nice. And they're both in the colors of this deck for their cycling. Up next is Street Wraith. Street Wraith is really nice, just for that pay 2 life and you can cycle it. All these creatures are basically, I wanted these creatures because they don't fall to a lightning bolt or electrostatic bolt or anything like that, because of their higher defense than some of the other options that could have been in the deck. Up next, I have 4 creatures that cycle that are land cycling creatures. I have Pale Recluse, which I do splash a single white source in my mana or my lands, so I can actually get that into play if I had to hard cast it, which could happen in very long grindy games. But the 4 cycling or the plane cycling is very relevant. It helps you fix your mana while still putting a 4/5 with reach into your graveyard, which is very, very nice, especially against certain matchups. It can help against, say, Affinity or the Delver matchups. Any of those, matchups that you could potentially see quite a bit of flyers, that reach is very relevant just as a chump blocker for some of the bigger things that are out there that do come in flying, especially against Affinity. Up next is Twisted Abomination. I really do like Twisted Abomination in this deck. It only swamp cycles, but generally I can get whatever I would need with Twisted Abomination. The cool thing about it is its regeneration, which is really awesome. It really almost makes it invincible. You can just keep hammering with him or keep chumping with him and just keep that one black open, which is really awesome. So that's kind of the core with the cycling. Most of those are all cantrips, so the deck basically has 16 cantrips in it, which is really nice. It helps you get into the combo where you want to be. Up next is the land destruction package, which is really interesting because there are very few formats that have a viable land destruction deck, where land destruction is a large part of it. Legacy does have pox and whatnot, but in Modern, this is the only viable deck that I know of at the moment that uses so much land destruction. Maybe Death Cloud could be put in there on that list, but Death Cloud has been on the decline recently, and it's not so much land destruction as this deck actually is. But first up, we're going to get into is Avalanche Riders, and Avalanche Rider is really awesome. It does cost 4, which is a little hefty, but he does have haste, and he can destroy any land, so he can even hit basic lands, which is really, really awesome. And he does die to his own effect, even if they don't block him, just by simply not paying the echo cost, and then he'll be in your graveyard. So if you do Cascade into a living end, when Avalanche Rider comes back, you will get another land, or you can get another land. It's really nice. Up next is Fulminator Mage. Fulminator Mage is one of the pricier cards in the deck. Is pretty much probably the second priciest card. The most expensive card in the main board, obviously, but when you go into your mana base and Verdant Catacombs and whatnot, they're a little more expensive. But Fulminator Mage is probably the most expensive card in the deck, and it is really a key part of the deck. But you can sacrifice Fulminator Mage and destroy target non-basic land, which is really nice. So you have 7 land destruction spells right there. Beast Within I put in there with the land destruction. It is removal. It can destroy target permanent, so it can destroy, say, a planeswalker, a land, enchantment, any of that, which is really nice to have that main board, because it is a catch-all. It is about as close as you can get to a Vindicate in Modern, but it's really nice. It does destroy just about anything that you would want destroyed, and it also can give a creature out there in play to put out Demonic Dread. So you could end of their turn destroy one of their lands, or actually at the beginning of their upkeep destroy one of their lands. Next turn target the beast token with Demonic Dread, and then start going into your living end combo. But up next is the kind of utility and a little bit of removal I'm going to talk about. Simian Spirit Guide is in there just for that extra 1 mana. Either you're trying to cycle very aggressively and you can get that 1 extra red mana, or you need to just a turn earlier go into a Fulminator Mage, Avalanche Rider, Beast Within, just to keep them from doing something, just keep them off their game, especially against certain decks like Tron and whatnot. So it does give you that extra mana, and it's very, very good against control, especially if they try to spell pierce you or mana leak, any of those. So you can pay that one extra mana, and they're not quite ready for you to do it. It is in here as a 2 of. I wouldn't. You could go 3 or you can go none. I like it. Some people pull those for some other things, but this is only an 18 land deck that I'm playing. But you also have to take into account that you have 16 cards that cycle. 4 of those being mana fixing, or they have some kind of land cycling. So 18 is not so bad, especially when you really only need to get to 3 mana to go off. So I guess you could pull this Spirit Guides, maybe change up your mana a little bit, or you can go just plain without them and maybe do some more Dismembers or Jund Charms or another Cycler or whatnot. But very nice. I really like them. Up next is Jund Charm, and I really like Jund Charm. It's in there with utility because it has so many uses. Especially, it can be a Pyroclasm if you need it. It can wipe someone's graveyard. Say you've run up against quite a bit of creatures and you've had to somehow destroy them, or butt heads, or Beast Within some creatures to take them out, and you really don't want to see those creatures come back. You can wipe their graveyard with Jund Charm. I do keep a 3rd copy in the sideboard, which is very nice. The +1, the 2+1/+1 counters, not so great. They are nice sometimes. I have used them before to try to play with some combat math, just to try to, instead of going 1-for-1s, you trade with a creature, or you trade with creatures and you get to keep yours and whatnot, or a little like anti-dismember or something like that. And speaking of dismember, I do have a singleton of dismember in here. It does help out. I kind of want a second dismember in here, but I'm on the fence about maybe losing my third Avalanche Rider for a second dismember. But dismember's in here. It does help against say Deathrite Shaman, just to get around that, or Scavenging Ooze, which can be a problem, but it's not as big of a problem as you would think, or people like to think when they have them, especially when your 10 card or your 11 cards, I don't know, your 11 land destruction spells you have, when those can just take care of all their green mana, which happens quite a bit. Whenever I see a Scavenging Ooze come into play, I just destroy all their green lands after that, or if I know they have them, I just start destroying green lands. That's the color I want to keep them off. And if they can't drop him and then put, pump 3 mana into him or more, he really doesn't do a whole lot. Or if they can't get him on the field because I'm just destroying every green land that they put into play. And most decks, like especially like the red green, the rock, that's the rock deck that's out there, or Jund, they only play a few actual lands and a lot of cyclers, especially when they're running things like Deathrite Shaman and whatnot. But this is the main board. Go ahead and clean this up, and I'll look into the sideboard, or the mana base, and we'll get to the sideboard. Alright, YouTube, all right. And we're back with the mana base for Living End. We'll go ahead and get into it. I have 2 Blood Crypts, 2 Overgrown Tombs, 1 Temple Garden, which is the splash for white, so you can play Pale Recluse. Next to that we have Stomping Ground, and we have a singleton basic Swamp, and a singleton of basic Forest right below that. and we have 4 Verdant Catacombs. Verdant Catacombs are really awesome because it can actually pull any color that we would need, say to cast a cycler or whatnot, or to activate a cycling ability off one of your creatures, which is very nice. Next up is Blackcliff Cleaves, as another black-red source with Blood Crypt, which is, it's very nice just to make sure that you're able to get to those colors. Next to that is your Copperline Gorge, and both those are very nice because they do come into play untapped generally, just because it is a very fast deck. You only need that 3 mana to cast anything in this deck, unless you start going into hard casting some of your cyclers or later game, but they're very nice to have early game. The last land I haven't talked about in this deck is Dryad Arbor, and Dryad Arbor is in here for a very specific reason. It's for Demonic Dread, because Dryad Arbor is a creature. The only downside is that it does have Summoning Sickness when it comes into play, so if you have to search it with Verdant Catacombs, it will have Summoning Sickness and it won't be able to tap for mana the turn it comes into play. But it is very nice just to be able to search for it with the Catacombs, or you can put it in play and tap 3 other lands or whatnot. You don't have that creature as a target for Demonic Dread. But this is pretty much the mana base. You could change up a couple things. I do know some people are running some utility lands in there, like Crescent Wolf Run, which is alright. I don't find myself using it as much as some people boast about it. It didn't do very much for me, so I decided to eventually just cut it and went with an additional Copperline Gorge. So this is pretty much the mana base. I'll pull up the sideboard that I'm running currently, and I may talk about some of the other sideboard options that you may have with this deck, depending on your meta that you're going to take this deck into. So I'll get this wrapped up. Hey YouTube, and we're back with the sideboard for Living End. We'll go ahead and just get into it. The first card is Gnaw to the Bone, which is really an awesome card. Instant speed just really makes it broken for this deck, especially when you're going against aggro decks and whatnot. If you can hold this to the last moment that you can and cast it, generally you can gain a substantial amount of life, and then the next turn you can just turn around and do it again for the flashback. Just simply an awesome card. I'd like to make room for maybe a third in the sideboard, but right now I don't think I could cut anything. Up next is a little extra graveyard hate that's relevant to the strategy for the deck. Fairy Macabre, and it is simply awesome just for the fact that you can just discard it and remove a creature or 2 creatures, or 2 target cards from a graveyard, which is really nice. Either you're using it maybe as a denial against certain combo decks, like if you come against Pod and they're going into their combo, and say their Murderous Redcap goes to their graveyard, it's about to come back, you can exile it using the fairy, which would disrupt the combo, which is really nice. There are other decks you'd want to pull this in against. There's a new Eggs deck that is very graveyard based that you could use this against, and some other things that are out there, especially the Mirror Match. Up next I have 4 Inkatures, and they are simply awesome. I can't ask for a better removal spell against Affinity. And Affinity just being one of the decks that's out there, and you're always going to run into it. If you go to a large event, you'll probably play at least one. Simply awesome. Pay 1, destroy target creature, or destroy target artifact. And then he goes to your graveyard. Well, when he comes back, he does it again. And he's simply awesome. He costs 1. The only thing is, it would be sorcery speed because it is a creature spell. But other than that, it's one of the greatest cards that you can side in against Affinity or any of the decks that are playing quite a bit of artifacts. Say you're coming up against one of the Tezzeret control builds or anything like that, they're really awesome to have in there. Next I have 3 ricochet traps, which is really, really awesome, especially against any of the control matchups. They can't counter the spell that cascades because the cascade effect would go on the stack, but they can counter the Living End when it comes into play off of Cascade. Well, that 1 extra mana, or that 1 red mana, you could ricochet trap to, say they play a remand on it, which is the best counter spell they can play against you, especially after you've boarded, is a remand. Just change the target remand to the trap, and you pay it for that 1 mana. You just change the target. That way they can't counter your stuff. It's kind of a counter spell, a red counter spell for 1. Very nice. Works very well. Up next is I have 2 Anger of the Gods. It's just a board wipe against decks like Affinity, where most of the creatures are small, and you really don't want to see any of those creatures go to the graveyard and then come back again off of Living End, because it just puts you right back in the place where you don't want to be. Up next is a single Jund Charm that I have in the sideboard. Has a little extra board wipe with the Anger of the Gods, and it's also graveyard removal, which is very relevant. It's quite a few decks. And then I have a single Dismember in here, which is nice against some of the green decks and Jund and whatnot, where you want to try to take down that Deathrite Shaman, or try to take down, say, their Savaging Ooze. But this is pretty much the deck for right now. If you guys have any questions, let me know. Everything's not perfect, and it's not the way some people will play it, but I like the deck, and I think it does well, and it's won quite a few smaller events that I've played with it at. So if you guys have any questions, comments, go ahead and post them down there, along with maybe suggestions if you'd like. I'm always open to anyone's feedback. But if you like the video, go ahead and like, subscribe. We always enjoy seeing people returning to check out some of my videos. So just you guys have a good one.